it's not a, hey, I voted, of course, saying it in a diplomatic way, but
right.
3, 2.
Great, good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew Hone, and I am the President and CEO of the Portland Business Alliance. I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning for our first ever video webinar. It's truly exciting that we can do this, that technology allows for it. And while we can't be meeting together in person, we want everyone who's on this phone call today to be aware that the Alliance remains a resource for all of you. Our team is more dedicated than ever to being there for you, our members, and for all of our partner organizations. We also want you to continue to be safe and stay healthy during this time. Please stay home and help us flatten the curve. That's what we are all in it for. And as we say here in Oregon, stay home and save lives. And I also want to acknowledge truly all of our healthcare workers who are on the front lines. Clearly, they cannot be on this call today fighting the COVID-19 outbreak. We can't thank them enough for what they're doing for all of us and our families. And a huge thanks to the many members on this call today who have answered our call for support, whether it be personal protective equipment, whether it be funding. The resources are saving lives in countless ways. And of course, a special thanks to Adi Clevitt and the Business Success Coaching Group who helped us launch this video cast series so quickly. And you can learn more about their work at bizsuccesscg.com. As I mentioned before, the Alliance is here to be a resource for our community. We have set up a page that is COVID-19 focused and is updated frequently. Visit portlandalliance.com/COVID-19 and follow us on social media for updates. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and all over the place at PDX_Alliance. And for this event specifically, #PBA events. Let's keep staying connected. Just a few engagement details for this, because it may be the first time all of you are using this function in Zoom. A recording of this presentation and links for all the resources mentioned will be available shortly after we wrap up this morning. During the presentation, I encourage all of you to use the webinar chat feature. If you have something to add to the conversation, that's the place to do it. Now, finally, if you have questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A option. This is separate from the chat function, so make sure you see that Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. We will have time for audience questions at the end of the presentation. When asking a question, please make sure to include your company name, your website, and where you're located. Where are you? We're joined not just by Portland area businesses and partners, but also statewide business organizations and their members. So we welcome all of you. And I would say we sent out the invitation for this yesterday at 3, and we have well over 200 attendees joining us today on this call, which is a testament to the work of these two great senators that I'm about to introduce. So this morning we are looking to focus on we are in historic times, the federal response to COVID-19 and the upcoming and current economic downturn that it has caused. We hope to also discuss the Senate-approved stimulus package and other federal initiatives to support small businesses impacted by this pandemic. With that, I would like to welcome our two U.S. senators from the great state of Oregon, Jeff Merkley and Ron Wyden. And if we could have a huge round of applause out there in the digital world, welcome to you both, senators. So good to see you this morning.
Thank you.
Can we hear you, Jeff? Senator Merkley, excuse me.
Yes, you can hear me now. I was making sure I was muted in case my dog barked, but she hasn't.
It's the new world we're living in, right? So we're going to dive right into this. People are just eager to hear from you. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. Listen, let's start with some of the known knowns. The release of information of unemployment claims this week, 3.3 million folks filing for unemployment here in Oregon. That's 76,000. We see what's happening. This is totally expected. But what happened this week was the largest emergency spending bill in our nation's history. And it was a lot of work. Both of you ended up supporting it. Can we walk through a few essentials of the bill? What's in it for workers? What's in it for businesses? And what's in it for the state of Oregon? Just help us understand that big picture.
And Andrew, first of all, on behalf of both Jeff and I, big thanks to the Business Alliance for doing this program And you all are just practicing what I call the Oregon way, always helping out, pitching in, bringing people together. Before I get to your first question, though, I just want to give folks a little bit of a development in the last couple of hours. I just got off the phone with the head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and it appears that Oregon is going to be getting some additional ventilators. And that is hugely important. We, as a delegation, have been working on this for days, and obviously we're going to have to track it. And Senator Merkley and I will tell you at some point, and your members would be interested in, sometimes when we're told equipment is going to arrive in Oregon, the two of us get on the phone and actually guide it into the delivery site in Oregon. So you'll get a little bit of a flavor of where this is. The first point I want to make deals with what this is really all about, this emergency spending effort. What we're trying to do is really put a pause on the economy. There has been so much pain for both workers and employers. The idea is to put a pause, give them these new tools that Senator Merkley and I are going to talk about so that they can get in a position to pay bills, and when the economic recovery from this kicks in, they will be in a stronger position. Now, the way I have looked at this is really two sides of a coin, and I'm going to touch on this briefly because the Senate Finance Committee, where I'm the ranking Democrat, has jurisdiction over both the employee pieces and the employer pieces. And as I say, Senator Merkley and I have worked closely together on all of this. With respect to the worker provision, as you noted, we have just taken this unprecedented hit, 3 million claims. The unemployment offices are going to be flooded. And so what we said we were going to do, the Senate Democrats in particular, and eventually most Republicans supported us, was to supercharge the unemployment system. We take the existing benefits, we'd lock them down so people could get them, and then we would ensure that all of these hard-hit workers would get $600 more per week for the next 4 months. And then what we said is, for the first time, we'd finally start dealing a fair shake to a lot of folks who I'm sure work with the Business Alliance who never really got fair treatment from the employment system. We're talking about the independent contractor, the gig worker, the self-employed person, the part-timer, the freelancer. They're all going to be able to get full unemployment plus the additional $600 per week for the next 4 months. Now, that's one side of the coin, which is the worker. But of course, we have the employer side of the coin as well, and that is before the Finance Committee also. And I authored what is called the Employee Retention Tax Credit. And this is refundable, and this basically says to all of your members, because you're working your heads off to keep your employees, that you're going to get this tax credit. It's a refundable tax credit. And that way you can keep your workers and meet payroll and deal with all of your other expenses. Then finally, we were very involved in the Finance Committee in several key pieces of legislation for small business. I introduced something called the Small Business Debt Relief Act with several of my colleagues, which would ensure that every small business with a loan from the SBA would be relieved of their loan payments. We're talking about principal, interest, and fees for the next 6 months. When that becomes law, as we hope today, 4,000 small businesses could qualify for debt relief. In addition, Senator Merkley and I both worked very hard for the loans and grants through the Small Business Administration program. They really are grants up to $10,000 to provide immediate relief for small business operating costs, and then loans, zero fee loans, up to $10 million. And because you all have put a focus on this with our office, it really would help communities of color and women and folks who really haven't gotten an opportunity for these kinds of jobs and the chance to get ahead And we were locked in negotiations right down the hall from where I'm sitting in the Senate Finance Committee for days on end. And I think that these steps that we were able to take in the Finance Committee on the worker side and the employer side are a significant step in the right direction.
This is great news. Thank you, Senator Wyden. Senator Merkley, please, from your end, how do you see this? What are the big picture elements we need to know about?
I think there are really 5 major pieces of this bill. And the first is the unemployment insurance, which is really on steroids, will cover a full pay for most of working America. The second is the small business provisions that are designed to keep people on the payroll. And that has several components that Ron has mentioned. I'll come back and re-mention them. But so unemployment insurance, the small business, keep people on the payroll. And the third is a really aggressive support to the healthcare system, $130 billion being injected into the healthcare system. Senator Schumer liked to call this a Marshall Plan for healthcare. Not sure it's quite a Marshall Plan, but it is a very significant boost. The fourth is state sustainability fund. And this is $150 billion that will go to the states, and there's a set aside for tribes. And essentially the way that it's written, a state would get 55%. And then the cities would get, that are over 500,000, so only Portland in this case in Oregon, would get 45%, well, they would get by population their share of the other 45%. And that leaves a big question that a lot of people are asking, well, what happens to the rest of the money? Each state's going to have to figure that out. Initially, it was described that it would be done to every county by population, but that's not the way the bill's written. So I have to correct what I said the other day when I was talking with some of you, and it'll be more flexibility for the state to decide how to distribute those funds to sustain small government. And then the final part is this very large 13.3 Fed window for medium-sized and big businesses. That is essentially a $500 billion window. It has some set-asides for the aviation world. The rest of the big business and medium business world, it will be able to essentially guarantee loans, so that 400+ billion becomes 4 trillion in liquidity injected. Now those big businesses, and small business, those are loans, but they will be able to avail themselves of that 50% tax credit that Ron was mentioning. So they get half of that essentially in a grant component on the backside. So those are the big pieces: unemployment insurance, small business, healthcare initiatives, state sustainability, and then a massive liquidity fund with 50% tax credit on the back end for medium and large businesses.
There's a lot in there. Thank you for that. And then just so all of our guests know, attendees know this, the kind of frequently asked questions sheet was sent out and distributed to all of you. You should have that in your inboxes. Just to move on to the next question, so a 2-part question here. We know that there was some back and forth at the beginning of the week between Democrats and Republicans in the Senate and with the administration.
Think?
Well, that's it?
You think?
Yeah. So tell us, what improved because of this negotiation? And that's what it was, and we all saw. What improved with the bill that we didn't necessarily see out here in the media?
I'd say the big 3 areas, Andrew, were the unemployment compensation package, and without kind of delivering a filibuster to your members, the first McConnell proposal had essentially nothing about unemployment compensation. It had a few lines basically saying, well, people could file and that kind of thing. So at every step of the way, we had a challenge of trying to promote what we called a bottom line. Our bottom line was 4 months of additional unemployment assistance on top of the existing benefit, so that every worker would be able to replace wages and would get on average $600 more per week for the 4 months. And at every step of the way, that was a battle. We went from the McConnell proposal in the finance room. When I went back and forth with Secretary Mnuchin, I felt I had an agreement for the 4 additional months. Then the first bill came out and said it was only 3 months, and it had all kinds of poison pills that were ideological that would have just held everything up. So unemployment compensation was one of the big factors in our having to make it clear we could not support the first version. It would have not been a bipartisan bill. Second, and Senator Merkley touched on it, is we were focused on state fiscal relief. And that debate actually began in the Finance Committee as well, when we offered a proposal to Secretary Mnuchin, and we were just light years apart. It originally came from Senator Reed of Rhode Island, very intelligent member on the Banking Committee. That was the second one that I think held it up. And finally, and this went to the fairness of putting this all together, it seemed like there was a double standard, is that I was having to deal with the labor secretary who kept saying you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that to get people more unemployment benefits. But then when it came to the slush fund, as it came to be known for the Trump administration that would be controlled by them, there weren't any guardrails. And we pushed very hard for guardrails. So it was unemployment compensation, the state fiscal relief, and the guardrails for this big trust fund. Those were the three issues that we had to work out, and fortunately we did.
Great.
Well, and I'll just mention that like one of those guardrails was whether or not companies could use these funds to do stock buybacks. That would have just been very infuriating to the public. If you don't need them to operate your business, you know, it is not an appropriate use. So there were other measures like that. I think Ron's covered them pretty well. I'm happy to get on to the next piece. But there's so many, there were probably 100 points that got improved if we did a detailed analysis of the bill through that extra negotiation.
Great. So let me, I want to make sure we leave a lot of time here for the many questions that we're receiving, but I do want to ask sort of one big question that I think is on everybody's mind. First and well, let me make it two questions. I'll start with the first. The execution of this is going to be really on the agencies, on the states. It's important for us to know when these funds are going to be available. What should our members be prepared for, to be expecting, and to be looking out for? So I just want to make sure, because there's a lot of folks who are just wondering how, okay, we just heard this, the Senate's done their work, the administration's doing their work, the House is doing. What should our members know? How is this going to time out? When are they going to expect to see this, these funds available?
Secretary Mnuchin, go ahead, Jeff. Oh, Secretary Mnuchin said that this money was going to get out in the next few weeks. Now, what I can tell you, having been at my desk here and trying to follow exactly what you're talking about, there is a great deal that we don't know about. But for example, one of the concerns that I have is, given the record number of applications for unemployment assistance, those offices are going to be flooded. Now,
Yep.
We were able in the second coronavirus package to get additional funds to help the state unemployment offices with the administration. But I think one of the things the state employment office is already wrestling with is that particular concern. I will tell you that we've been working with the Small Business Administration to make sure that those grants and loans can get out quickly, and I think they are really set up to be able to do it. And Senator Merkley and I both worked on something called an EIDL, an Economic Injury Disaster Loan Emergency Grant. And those are going to, I think, really help people quickly, and it expands the number of people who would be eligible for these loans. We will have it up on our website, both of us, very quickly. We'll be getting out the URL so people have it. You can go to wyden.senate.gov. But it's clear that, particularly just looking at this record number of unemployment, claims, it's going to take some time. But I think we tried to do those things by, for example, using an averaging figure, $600 per week, every week for the next 4 months. Hopefully that'll expedite it, and watch our websites because we'll be giving out details on that.
Great. Senator Merkley.
Well, Andrea, and I'll mention that there are so many components to this bill. We mentioned the big ones, but there's a substantial education component to this bill to help out K-12 and to help out public universities and nonprofit universities. There is a commodity credit corporation provision that increases the cap by $20 billion that can help out ag, and there's a set aside in there for small, the non-big crops, the smaller special interest crops that might end up being of importance to Oregon ag. There's a lot of help to support the delivery of food to low-income, unemployed individuals through expanding SNAP. There's about $7 billion on housing. There are the direct payments to families. So that's just a smattering of kind of the next layer. And but the only piece that I'll kind of focus on for your direct question on how fast is the small business loans that are convertible to grants. And these small business loans designed to cover your payroll and designed to cover that payroll so you can keep people well employed, because it has two big advantages. Your employees don't go anywhere, and they don't experience the stress of having to sign up for COBRA or some other form of health care, or the expense and stress of signing up for unemployment insurance. So when we come out on the other side of this and start to gear up our business again, we'll be able to do it a lot faster, be a lot better for the employees, a lot better for the businesses. Now, the small business development centers are normally the place one would go to apply through their website. But the way we set this up is to make banks able to do these loans across America. So the administration has hopefully, while we've been working on this bill, working with the major banks to have them ready to roll out these loans. These loans are convertible to 100% grant as long as you use the funds for payroll and other core expenses. In fact, the amount you can get is 125% of payroll. And that means you get another 25% over payroll to help you with rent, mortgage, supplies, etc. So this is really a key deal to keep small businesses going, but to apply quickly. They're setting it up through the banks. I hope that the executive team is ready, really already working with the banks to roll that out. My guess is it will probably take 6 or 7 days, but hopefully they've been working to grease the skids for it.
That's great. And, you really answered one of the first questions out of the gate from Jared Hollum over at Perkins Company, who's a great board member with the Alliance, about how quickly these convertible loans will be available. So thank you for that. And I want to give credit to Andrew McGough, who's at Work Systems, who's out there, who asked the question that I'm going to end my series of questions with before we really turn it over to our audience. But the thing that's on everybody's mind is we all know this is the third round here, major legislation that's gone through. What do you see coming up next? Because we know this is going to be a marathon. What do you see that is most pressing, that was not resolved with this bill, and that what folks out there can expect? And just, Andrew, thanks for the question and all the work you're doing with Work Systems here in Multnomah and in Washington counties.
I think it's clear there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting left to do on the healthcare front. For example, the legislation calls for $100 billion more to help buy medical supplies, support hospitals, innovation on treatments. But we're going to have to help our medical providers, and we're going to have to do, I think, a lot of public education, which is what the Business Alliance does best. There's a lot of talk about how we have a choice now between fighting the virus or saving the economy. Yeah. I think that's dead wrong. I think that is a false choice. That is not an Oregon way to approach things. And if the government lifts the quarantines too early and people get sick, then all of a sudden you're going to have even more economic damage as the hospitals and others face additional people coming in. So we got to listen to the public health experts, and then we've got to be hands-on with healthcare every step of the way. For example, on the Finance Committee, we have jurisdiction over much of healthcare spending in America. There's a provision that seniors have wanted for many, many years to basically be able to refill their prescriptions, to get essentially 90 days more easily under Medicare Advantage and Part D. We're doing that. We're also promoting telemedicine so you can care for people at home, greater use of non-physician providers. So I will tell you, substantively, the big issue probably to watch is healthcare. And healthcare, of course, is such a large part of the Oregon economy as well. And second, I've seen statements from Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader, who's indicated, well, there's really not going to be another package. We're kind of done. This is it. And the best thing that you all can do as we move to the end of the questions is you can get to me and to Senator Merkley examples of where the system, on both sides, workers and employers for the economy, and then on the domestic side in areas like healthcare, which is such a big driver of the quality of life in our state, we can make the changes. We, I think, have started to make some policies that are fresh, that are different. For example, when there's going to be a healthcare surge, now OHSU and some of our providers are going to be in a position to, for example, modernize their entranceways so that they can take all of this kind of additional challenge with more patients coming in. But hands-on every step of the way. That's why I'm sitting at my desk today. That's why Senator Merkley is on the other end at the Oregon site to be able to work together on these kinds of issues. And we got to be hands-on every step of the way.
Senator Merkley.
I was on the line with the small chambers all around Oregon, and they're very worried about whether they're going to be able to pull in enough monthly dues and annual dues to keep their folks employed. And they have an absolutely critical role to play in the education process, the facilitation process. So I tried to get the 501c6s included in help, wasn't able to succeed. So I'm going to be paying attention to whether we have an opportunity to do that in the next bill. I'm concerned our public universities are not going to get enough help in this bill. Both the president of Oregon State and University of Oregon have conveyed that they are on the quarter system. Their next quarter starts at the end of this month, the end of March, and they're concerned about a massive loss of tuition as students decide, well, with all the chaos, I should just take a quarter off because I can't do my laboratory work and I can't do this and I can't do that. So maybe I'll just take a quarter off. So they may need a lot more work. But what we do know is we've never been down this path before. So a lot of this infusion of funds is going to help enormously. But since we've never been here before, we know we don't have a roadmap for it. There's going to be things we missed. And that's where we're going to be listening to all of you and to the chambers, to all the stakeholders. What did we miss? I am pretty confident that within 4 weeks or less, we'll be doing another bill because we can't have gotten it all right on this untested journey.
Great. Well, it's good to hear the work will obviously be continuing. And now I want to transition to some of our great members out there and businesses. They're just asking seems like some really good clarifying questions. So I want to thank Morgan Gary, who's at Spin Laundry Lounge. It's good to get a question from you. We hope you're doing well. She's over in North and Northeast Portland. We keep hearing that in order to get these SBA loans that you have to retain your employees. But some folks are just going to be in a position to have to do some temporary layoffs. Would that make them ineligible for this loan support? And what your feedback is on this?
Well, with respect to SBA loans, you're relieved of your loan payments, principal, interest, and fees for the next 6 months. Now, that alone is going to help 4,000 Oregon small businesses qualify for debt relief, and the law does not stipulate the kind of issue, doesn't even address the kind of issue that was just asked.
What I would say is that a lot of companies have laid off people. If you rehire them, you are eligible for this convertible loan that covers your payroll. So even if you laid people off, you may want to rehire them because you're basically getting 100% of those payments plus an extra 25% on top. So really, I would encourage businesses to really look carefully at that because we're going to be able to come out of this a lot faster if we don't dismantle our small businesses. If you've laid people off completely, then there's other forms of help. There are $10,000 grants for very small businesses. You can't get it as a grant if you use the Paycheck Protection, the big convertible loan. And there is the retention tax credit for those if you keep part of your folks on that Ron was so involved in. But essentially, if you lay people off, they're going to be helped through unemployment insurance that will cover their wages for most workers. If you keep them on, you will be reimbursed 100% for that cost as long as you use the money for the dedicated purposes of payroll and core expenses.
Great, great. Thank you for that. And now just want to move on to a statewide question. Mike Salzgiver, really appreciate the question from our general contractors out there. Made the point, listen, there are parts of the economy that are still functioning. Contracting is one of them, doing construction work and doing public construction as well, especially on our roads and bridges that help keep the critical infrastructure of this country moving. While we are dependent on a delivery-based economy, right? We are all staying at home and we need those folks moving. So from our contractor's perspective, the key thing, and I'm just curious your response on this one, is to make sure these public projects and these big agency projects, whether they be federal or state, keep moving. Can you comment to just give some assurance, are we stopping contracting right now, or are we just ramping that up, and what can our contractors expect from the federal government?
Andrew, obviously the key federal agencies are just consumed with these kinds of crises, particularly the health, crisis and the question of businesses just keeping their doors open. We have made the argument that Mike is really making, and that is part of businesses being able to keep their doors open is to ensure that the contracting process for public and private kind of projects, particularly in terms of infrastructure. We've got a lot of work, for example, in housing to do. We haven't really mentioned housing today, and both of us have been very involved in that. We have got to keep it moving. So our message to your members and to Mike's members is, if they're seeing some holdup, some glitch in a project that is online, now, our job, and we're prepared to respond and respond quickly, is to do everything we can to remove those kinds of hurdles. And my argument is to agencies that might be kind of holding back. I've been saying, look, holding back is going to make it hard to make the economic progress, for example, that the president is always talking about and we all want to make. So this is really interrelated, making progress and addressing the economic damage.
In terms of construction, the Oregonian has some good articles on it this morning. You have a situation where people can be more than 6 feet apart, can be very careful about shaking hands or so on and so forth. But as the article makes clear, there's a lot of observations from construction sites where that separation is not happening. Mm-hmm. So it's changed. Each state is making these decisions. The federal government is not shutting down construction or giving detailed instructions to companies. Here in Oregon, my understanding is that the governor has said construction can go ahead, but do it in a really smart way. I believe some other states have shut down both residential and commercial construction. I think that for that to continue in our state, I'm imagining that the company is going to have really have some people dedicated to enforcing the social distancing on the construction site, because we have to break the chain of infection if we're going to get to the other side of this. There's also a similar question that's been raised about factories. Some factories have said we are essential, we are chips and so forth, they're going to keep being produced. Some employees are raising questions, but are we really social distanced enough? And so big companies need to have somebody dedicated to learning and applying the best practices if the company is operating. And if they can't operate with the social distancing, they really do need to shut down till we get this under control.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
I got a bulletin just off the screen that the House has now passed the bill. So good work to all the people in the Business Alliance who are out pushing it, and Senator Merkley and I are giving you a little smile at the hot off the presses development.
Yeah, I see that it's from our colleague Kevin. You'll forgive me for the butchering of your middle name, Farashi O'Malley. He just noted that at 10:26 that the House did pass the bill. So this is great news to our House members here in Oregon. They've done great work as well. So this is great. This is moving. The wheels are moving. Our next question is from Lynn Handlin, who is self-employed and asking the question on this piece about unemployment for those who are self-employed. How will they get to file their 2019 taxes? How will this interface with those who are in the freelance gig independent community that can just get a little bit more details fleshed out about how they can access these benefits?
We're going to make sure that they can get access the same way as everybody else does, Andrew, and our office is available to help them. Here's how we got to this place. when we started this debate about supercharging unemployment insurance, I said to my colleagues in the Senate, this is a big debate in the Finance Committee. Look, the unemployment system hasn't changed much since 1930 when it was developed in Wisconsin. There have been little changes here and little changes there. But back in 1930, nobody ever thought about a gig worker. Nobody ever thought about the unemployed person. So those people under what we have arranged are basically going to get into the system exactly the same way everybody else would. And we'll be posting information from the Employment Office and other agencies with respect to more details. But for the first time, the federal government is basically saying that this part of the economy, which is part of the 21st century, is not going to get the short shrift it's gotten in the past. And that self-employed person who is just on the phone or in some other site to talk with us can get treated like everybody else.
Great. Senator Merkley, anything to add on that piece?
Well, no, I don't need to add anything on that.
Great. So we will move to a really actually interesting question here. Amanda Dalton, who's with some of our Northwest grocers and represents several small businesses, nonprofits. And there's a really good question here that I think embeds into a, hey, what's next? As we obviously know, many states have moved to a stay-at-home order. There could be a federal one, we don't know. But one thing that folks are waiting for, and this is a key piece that I think a lot of folks really want to know more about, is the guidelines from the Department of Labor as it relates to understanding what part of their workforce that aren't maybe doctors, for example, will be treated under federal guidelines for whether or not they're exempt or whether they should be continuing to work, whether they're at grocers. So the big picture question that I'm hearing coming from Amanda is, when are we going to understand the guidelines for workers who are maybe not doing frontline healthcare response, but are responsible for frontline services that may not be doctors, but could be healthcare workers? Give us a sense of when we can expect some guidelines and what's your take on a federal stay-at-home order? Because I think that's a real interesting question that we're going to have to be grappling with in the days and weeks to come.
Well, first, Andrew, I would say that the Trump administration, from my assessment, is not very likely to do it. For example, I just read that apparently the governor of Mississippi has questions about a whole host of these steps that are much less extensive than a stay-at-home order. So I find it very unlikely that the Trump administration is just going to say, we're not going to have a federal stay-at-home order. We'll have to see. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I just watch how Republican governors are reacting, and I find that not very likely. But the question is enormously important, and Senator Merkley and I both have been concerned about, for example, making sure that a lot of the workers have the protective, equipment that they need. We just read this morning about a nurse in another part of the country who died because he didn't have the protective equipment. So there needs to be clarification with respect to the criteria that you're talking about for these various workers. The Department of Labor would be a logical place for leadership, and our state can do some of that as well. And I think the question is really two parts. Do we think there's going to be a federal stay-at-home order based on the comments from Republican governors? And I got to believe that the Trump administration is paying attention to that. We're not anywhere close to that point right now, but the question that was asked is enormously important. And yes, we need labor officials at the federal and state level to step up and better define how these various medical providers are going to be treated. And the question of, hey, not everybody is a doctor. For example, under the healthcare part of the package, we're going to have a bigger role, and I pushed very hard for it, for non-physician providers.
Mm-hmm.
So the question that is being asked here in terms of what kind of criteria are going to be applied is very relevant. We'll have some more to say about that soon.
Great. Senator Merkley.
Yeah, definitely no federal stay-at-home unless things change dramatically. They're going to leave it up to the governors to figure this out state by state. In terms of the healthcare world, will be something that our state and other states will wrestle with. Right now, you have a lot of the healthcare providers, for example, optical, what's the right word for it?
Opticians.
Folks that do glasses and eye surgeries and so forth. They are shutting down in part because they're afraid of infecting the patients, and part of the patients are afraid of getting infected, and in part because they want to preserve the medical supplies for the real frontline workers. That's going to just have to be sorted out. I wanted to mention a couple other things that I feel I missed. One is on this question of laying people off and keeping people on. We do have a shared work model in Oregon where you can essentially have someone on unemployment insurance to a certain degree and also still be employed to a certain degree. And that way you get the best of both worlds. You may get less funds out the door, but you also keep a formal attachment to your worker and they retain their health care benefits. Someone else had been asking me earlier if on the small business piece, do small nonprofits, and by small, we're really talking people who employ 500 or less, are they eligible? Yes, they are eligible the same way as small businesses.
That's great. And I see that question was from Ruth Shelley. She's a great member of the Portland Business Alliance, running the Portland Children's Museum, and is such a great institution.
And Andrew, one other point that relates to that question, in the UI package, the unemployment insurance package, there's also, for the first time, a significant expansion of what's called work share in order to help employers to get more flexibility with respect to their workforce and have the workers still be in a position to get some of those needs met by UI.
That's great. Thank you both. We have so many more questions, but I see we are at time. I would just ask both of you, we're in these times of uncertainty. You and your teams have been working overtime, as have so many folks, to be able to adapt and adjust and to be able to help. What message do you want to leave with all the business members, all the groups that are on this call? We are up to 200 and almost 30 participants at this point. What message in about 30 seconds can you share with all of them? And I'll leave you with last minute thoughts from our end as well. Go ahead, Senator Merkley, let's start with you.
Well, we not only have a healthcare challenge and an economic challenge, we have an anxiety and fear challenge as well, because we haven't been here before. But we can look at other nations. We can see that China has virtually no new infections now. We can see that South Korea has proceeded to bend the curve, flatten the curve, and their infections are just about even and starting to come down. We know that it works, that social separation works, social distancing works. We need a lot more tests. I'm going to be focused on that. A lot more protective equipment. I'm going to be focused on that. And we need everyone in the state to do a lot more social distancing. If we don't break this chain, it's going to be with us for a long time. And not only will it be bad for the healthcare, it will be bad for business. So it's a lose-lose proposition if we don't really take serious this social distancing. But I guess the silver lining, or the hope I want to put, is we now know we can get to the other side of this. So let's follow the model of other nations that have done it. The quicker we do it, the faster we'll be back to work and healthy. And to everyone out there who got on this call, thank you. Small business across Oregon, you are the heart of this economy. And that's why we work so hard to make sure you could either, if your employees were furloughed, they'd get robust unemployment insurance, but if you kept them on, you'd be able to do so with the government covering the cost for the next 2 months. So let's keep working together. I want to introduce Jake on my team, Jake Okenberg. He is my point of contact on small business. Please call him. He's been returning calls left and right and trying to help people steer their way through this. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. Senator Wyden, please.
Andrew, I think I'd like to end this meeting with a big thank you to the Portland Business Alliance. Been terrific. Hadn't been a bad question out there. And I want to end this the same way I've ended every one of my 970 town hall meetings. That has been something that Senator Merkley and I both, do, open to all kind of town hall meetings. And I always end up talking about the Oregon Way. And people wonder what it is, and is it written down in Pioneer Square or the Capitol building? It's what we're doing here, which is not talking about political party, but talking about ways in which you can help people. And I've been just trying to keep tabs on some of them. I don't know if they're a member of the Portland Business Alliance, but the Jupiter Hotel in Portland is helping to shelter folks who are going through homelessness. Now that is the Oregon way, but that's how everybody is trying to pitch in and help. You got the police in Sweet Home delivering prescriptions to the senior citizens. And I guess what I would say to wrap up is Senator Merkley and I, our job is to work on federal legislation and policy, and we've tried to tell you what experiences we've been having with respect to our committees. And I'm very honored to be Oregon's guy on the Senate Finance Committee, which deals with taxes and healthcare and trade and the like. Senator Merkley on an enormously important committee, the Appropriations Committee. So that's been when Oregon's been at its strength, when we've been at the Appropriations Committee and at the Finance Committee. So what we'd like to do is on the government side, have your members tell us what gaps they're seeing in the various kinds of programs. And then by way of the kind of help your neighbor kind of thing, order takeout from a restaurant that might be having, you know, some challenges. Or if you got a small retailer down the road right now and you can order a birthday present in advance online, do that. But that's really what is our state at its best. That's vintage Oregon, helping out. Our job is to work on legislation and policy. We both feel that there are going to be lots of areas where the third package didn't get it right. I've been looking at telemedicine. It's been something I've focused on since I was director of the Gray Panthers, getting more care for people at home. There are a lot of ways we can keep building on this. So get us your ideas and your suggestions. And then if everybody who's following this program just continues to do what Oregon does best, which is helping neighbors, staying involved, trying to find solutions, always going to bat for people, that's when I think we do most for Oregon.
Thank you for those sentiments. The Oregon way is the way to be. I want to thank our Senators Merkley and Wyden for your time, for your efforts, your entire team's efforts, all those that were on this call. I want to remind everyone that we will be back here Tuesday at 10 a.m. with Mayor Wheeler to be doing a similar webinar with the Mayor of Portland. So please make sure to register online. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. We'll make sure the questions.
Andrew,
yes.
Can I just mention,
please.
Because Jake is handling these issues for Senator Merkley very well, and Tim Leahy in my office is Jake's counterpart. So when folks have questions, you got 100% of Oregon's United States senators willing to help.
That's what we love to hear. So thank you, Tim. Thank you, Jake. Thank you to the members of the Alliance, to the staff that got this together in record time. And again, portlandalliance.com/COVID-19. Stay healthy, stay home, save lives, and flatten the curve, everyone. Have a great day and be safe. And here's to a brighter future. Be well.
Well done, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you.